Welcome in, everybody, to our webinar today, Patterns in the Tapestry, a Typology of Collective Giving Groups. My name is Isis Krause. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Philanthropy Together. I had the pleasure of co-authoring this report with the dear Michael Layton. Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Isis. My name is Michael Layton. I hold the W.K. Kellogg Community Philanthropy Chair here at the Johnson Center for Philanthropy in lovely snow-laden Grand Rapids, Michigan, hence the very heavy sweater.
Wonderful. We're so excited for you all to be with us today. This is an amazing size group for talking about such a nerdy topic, a landscape of collective giving groups, and specifically looking at this typology that we've developed and a set of 7 archetypes. Before we get started, I would love for you in the chat to say hello, share where you're zooming in from, and what are 3 words to describe a collective giving group? Think in your head about a, stereotypical in your mind. When you think of a giving circle or a collective giving group, what are 3 words that you would use to describe it? Is it big? Is it small? Is it tight-knit? Is it, local neighbors? Is it family? What are the words that you would use to describe a giving circle or collective giving group? I'll read some of these out as they come in. Joyful, fun, and family. Trust, reassuring, and hopeful. I love that. So we have some characteristics, we have some just values and feelings words. Effective, trust, and hopeful. Friendly, impactful. Women engaging
Mm,
community. Supportive, collective, local, women. Connection, hopeful, love. I love all of these words. That is exactly right. When
mm.
we were working on this report, we often reflected on the phrase, if you know one giving circle, you know one giving circle. If you know one collective giving group, you know one collective giving group, because they're all so different. And what this report is trying to show is some of those patterns throughout. Thank you all for sharing in the chat. Michael?
Thanks, Isis. So we want to start off with a little bit of background, and we want to share our definition of what collective giving is. So it involves individuals, as distinct from collaborative funding, which usually involves organizations and foundations. So it's individuals pooling their resources, their knowledge and networks to support a cause that is important to them, that they all want to see advance. So it usually involves some kind of shared or democratic decision making. Um, and our previous research has shown it deepens and reinforces community connections, as well as reinforcing and giving amazing opportunities for learning and engagement, all with the goal of having an amplified impact and empowering communities. And central to the practice of collective giving are the 5 T's, right? We go beyond the typical 3 T's of time, talent, and treasure, and we include testimony, raising one's voice, as well as ties, bringing your connections to a group. And as many of you know, this is the second report that the Johnson Center has done with Philanthropy Together. The first one, I'm going to talk about the first one and leave it to my amazing colleague, Isis, to talk about patterns in the tapestry. The first one, In Abundance, we released last April when the sun was out and the birds were singing, a wonderful moment. And that was an analysis of the landscape of collective giving, where we tried to understand the size and scope, as well as the individual impact of collective giving. And that report I co-authored with Adriana Lozon Ceballos from Colmena Consulting, and Isis and Ilyasa and Sara were indispensable allies in getting that work over the finish line. So briefly going to share the sort of top line findings out of that. The most exciting news, and one that got a lot of attention in the media, were just the numbers of the growth of the sector. Between 2017 and 2023, 4,000 collective giving groups who mobilized 370,000 philanthropists. Amazing stretch how many Americans are involved in that. This was focused on the US, who donated over $3 billion with a B. And I think that number was shocking. And for good or bad, in research and in the media, we focus a lot on dollars, and the dollar numbers were impressive. But the other findings for us were particularly important for the real power of understanding collective giving. And first and foremost, this is number one for a reason. It democratizes and diversifies philanthropy. And what do we mean by that? What we mean by that is that it engages donors, often called everyday donors, who come from a variety of backgrounds, breaking the mold of philanthropy being understood as a practice by maybe older white guys who look like me, writing big checks out of big foundations, to the whole full spectrum of human beings across the United States, as someone pointed out in the chat, especially women-led and women-powered movement. So that for us was an important finding. And number two, what gets funded? And what we mean by that is it's not just the 501c3 registered charities that often scoop up most of the resources. Many collective giving groups decide to give to newer organizations, decide to support individual entrepreneurs, and they often support a greater variety of organizations centering the issue or the value of equity in their funding decisions. So that's what we mean by that finding too. And then next, it pushes the bounds of how philanthropy is practiced. And I would also add who is considered a philanthropist as well. In this, we see that there's a lot of learning that occurs, engagement that occurs, and it moves philanthropy beyond the normal definitions and bounds which academics like yours truly often want to impose on it. And we were very excited about those findings as well. And then fourthly, it deeply impacts members themselves. The numbers that we saw in our member survey, where we asked people about their social connections, about their sense of efficacy, about their engagement in community, what we found was participation in collective giving, coming together with your friends or your neighbors or people you share values with, has this incredible catalytic effect where you wind up coming together because you want to pool your resources and give to a cause you care about. And then all of a sudden you're volunteering. All of a sudden you're on a board. All of a sudden you're engaged in a political campaign and you're finding other ways to connect and improve your community. And this, we really have to acknowledge Adriana's contribution to this. I think as a researcher, she really made an important contribution in understanding this, the importance of these kinds of questions to our survey. And then fifth, collective giving is a catalyst for social cohesion and change. And this is a corollary of what I just talked about. I think all of us understand and know that in the United States, we suffer from political divisions, lack of understanding between groups, and sadly, social isolation. It's been recognized by our former Surgeon General as being a health crisis for us. And what collective giving does for its members is it brings people together. It enables them to talk about their values, talk about things that matter, and increases what we academics call social capital, the bonds of reciprocity and trust that are so important to a joyful human life and the health of a community. And so that, for me, is one of the most exciting findings that came out of that. Beyond the dollars, the numbers are impressive, but when you see how it moves the needles in people's lives that participate, you understand the passion and commitment that people of Philanthropy Together and the folks that are in this, lighten up this chat. I can't even keep up with the passion that they feel about this movement. And now passing it to Ilyasa, as those of you that read the original report, we did have a section that talked about these patterns. And we decided that it was so important and so worthwhile that we wanted to highlight it in a separate publication. And kudos to Isis, thanks to her systematic mind and her long experience in the field. She really illuminated these patterns for us and gave rise to this publication. So Isis, thank you, and take it over.
Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, as Michael said, I've been involved in collective giving since about 2012 or 2013. I helped start the Amplifier network out of the Natan Fund in a support role way back then, and it's been just incredible to see the growth of this movement overall. And so, why are we calling it patterns in the tapestry? I think the metaphor for me is that when you have 20 collective giving groups, it's really hard to tell if you're looking at a pattern or if you're just looking at a one-off anomaly. But as we grew and grew, and there are now 4,000 groups, it was way easier to then start seeing the patterns emerge out of the existing set of who's there. The typology that we created has three core components to it. The first is who and why. So these are the membership characteristics and the purpose of the group. Then next up, we have the what and the where, the giving levels, the decision making, and the recipients, and then how and when, the processes, structures, and supports that undergird what the collective giving group does. By developing those three components of the typology, you're then able to look at any collective giving group and both understand the fundamental reason why they got started, their impetus for creation, down to what some of their processes and approaches are. I'll go through each of those in a little bit more depth. So the first one, the who and why in terms of membership characteristics, each of these within the typology has basically a binary slider, and I'll talk a little bit about why. There are many different ways that these groups can come together on any of these axes, but to keep this research really actionable and simple, we wanted to highlight the two main polar opposites that typically exist in the field. Obviously, there's many things in the middle that somebody can fall within, but wanted to just highlight in the most simple way possible what those were. So from a community perspective, many groups come together really from that sense of belonging on the right, that they're there for social cohesion. They want to find their best friends. Holly Lee always talks about it as a sisterhood, right? That belonging is really crucial. A lot of other groups come together because they want to meet new people. I've heard countless stories of folks moving to a new city and wanting to network with others, and a collective giving group is a wonderful way of doing that. Membership inclusion can span multiple identities. We can have groups where you have, an 80-year-old white woman and a 15-year-old LGBTQ identifying teen in the same group, and that can totally work. And you have other groups that are just a group of Black women coming together supporting, Black focused issues. Those are both possible in this collective giving movement. The origin is around how the group started. Most collective giving groups are newly created. It's a group of people coming together, whether it's neighbors or families or friends or colleagues or coworkers, and a new group is created. Sometimes, though, they're connected to a nonprofit or a corporate entity where it already has an employee base, and that's coming together. The size of the group typically is actually very large. 38% of folks in our survey had more than 100 members in their group, really great for networking. And about a third of them also had less than 25. So either way works. It just depends on what you're looking to do. The source of the gift can either come from members themselves, that they're the ones actually donating into the pot of the collective giving group, or there can be mobilizing others to give. And there's a few models that do that. Learning on the left here, exploratory curiosity. What we mean by that is that sometimes folks are just, they're not focused on an issue area, or they're not deeply embedded in some learning ecosystem. They're really just following what the group is into at that moment and how they can deepen their learning. And then impact intention. Many groups this might be their first entree point into philanthropy. And so their giving ends up being more like charity. Maybe this is their first intentional act of giving beyond just being asked at the cash register. And so they're giving to, the Red Cross or an organization doing direct relief work. And then other groups are really focused on that social change piece. And many of the groups in our survey really showed that 80% of groups cite sort of a commitment to change, not charity. So that's really key for this movement, as we've seen. The second one here is the what and the where. The what's given can be just money, Many groups just give money and that's it, they walk away. And many other groups also give their time and their talent and their treasure. 60% of members report an increase in how much they volunteer by being part of a collective giving group. The giving level per person, under and over 500 seems like a huge, right? Anything over 500 is the moon. But 50% of groups actually make annual contributions below $500. So this really shows that this movement is an everyday giver movement. It certainly can scale from there, and we see really exciting things happening with high net wealth individuals wanting to fund alongside a giving circle. So there's certainly ways where more funding can come along, but this is an everyday giver movement. The recipient identifications, either the group can nominate, the members of the collective can nominate who will ultimately receive the pot of funding, or they might lean on community leaders or experts or other nonprofits in the sector to be able to source those recommendations. The recipient connection to membership, either it's completely agnostic, they're just pulling names from a hat, or it doesn't matter if it's for a specific group. And then other groups are really focused on what we termed here solidarity giving, that, as I mentioned earlier, it's a group of Black women wanting to fund, Black-led nonprofits serving Black women and girls, that sort of solidarity between the giver and the receiver really comes together. The decision-making type, 53% of groups operate on majority rules, and about 27% operate off of consensus. So sometimes when people think of a collective giving group, they think it's always, a group around a kitchen table fighting about where to give, and it's really consensus driven. But in reality, most of the groups are actually doing it based off of vote and majority rule. So there's really no wrong way to do that. Recipients are typically traditional nonprofits. 95% of groups fund nonprofit organizations, but many more are also looking into all the ways they can use their treasure, whether that's through individual giving, C4 giving, investment work beyond just nonprofit giving for a tax donation. And then the geography of giving. Vast majority are giving in their local or hyper-local area. This is really about the town that you live in, people coming together. Only 5% fund nationally and only 2% fund internationally. So you can really tell that this is everyday donors, as I mentioned with the $500, giving in their backyards together. And that's where they're seeing the change. And the third component of the typology here is the how and the when. So most groups are long-term. 7.5 years is the average that folks are in a collective giving group. That's a long time. Sometimes I think we hear misconceptions around, oh yeah, I joined for, half a year and then I'm out. But actually, many, many people are joining collective giving groups for the long term. Though others are just one-off, they join a pop-up giving circle, or they're only in it for a cycle of 1 year. Giving approach, I think when this movement started, it was more focused on restricted philanthropy, project-based, strategic philanthropy, all of the terms that you hear around that. But over the last few years that Philanthropy Together has been around, that issues and organizations like the Trust-Based Philanthropy Project, as philanthropy has shifted, so has the movement itself. And many are now also focused on trust-based philanthropy practices. In terms of influence, groups tend to hold their own decision making, but if you're connected to a host organization like a community foundation or a nonprofit or a corporation, sometimes the decisions of who you're funding will be influenced by that other entity. From a governance perspective, this movement is very informal, but sometimes you also have folks incorporating into more 501c3 formal structures, groups that tend to move larger dollars and are around for 10 or 20 years tend to end up incorporating as their own 501c3. And many things you'll see on this next line around money management, tools like Grapevine and others that act as a technology platform really help keep this movement informal, quick moving, where you don't need to set up that entire formal structure in order to operate. On the money management, many are also supported by a host institution, which provides more than just the fiscal management, but the host can also offer convening support and facilitation support and member recruitment, and community foundations and women's funds have primarily done that over the last 20 or 30 years. From a staffing perspective, 47% of groups actually have paid staff support. So I think folks think of this movement as all volunteer. It's just, people in a living room coming together, but this takes work to do. As we all know, anything worth doing is worth doing well, and it takes time and effort to do that. And so 47% of groups actually have some kind of paid support. Of course, that might be a 5 hours a week admin support, right? But it's still somebody that's making the operations run. And I think that's really important for us when we think about the infrastructure and the overall ecosystem, that this work of moving $3 billion isn't just happening. It takes time and money and effort to move that money, to organize people, to make those requests, to send those reminders, to set up the meetings, and that all needs to be paid. And then in terms of meeting format, 35% of groups primarily met in person, 43% opt for a hybrid format, and 22% met exclusively online. When our group was gathering before Philanthropy Together launched, when this was just a seed of an idea of having all of the collective giving groups come together, there were no virtual circles. We did a landscape map at that moment. Virtual circles was not a thing, but because of COVID, the rise of Zoom, us all being in this space together, that has really changed over time, and it's exciting to see that. I'm here in Los Angeles, and what I've heard from so many folks is that the hybrid option provides more opportunities for the in-person time to really be about that networking space, the belonging space, the relationships, and doing the meeting type stuff where you're sorting through grant applications or looking and reviewing folks to give to, or having a certain discussion. That can happen in a hybrid way. The other piece is in geographies that are more rural and have long stretches of land between neighbors. A hybrid option or a virtual option can really facilitate coming together in that way. So those are the three core structures of the typology. When you're using this yourself, I wanted to make this as actionable as possible. And the hope is that you would actually put a little dot on where you land, whether you're a new group just getting started and you're thinking about the design of your group, or whether you're an existing group and you're trying to pressure test, is that who we want to be? Is that the form and function that we want to operate on? And so you'll see here in the report, if you haven't yet read it, you can notice how the two options of the sliders came together, whether that's, 53% majority rule or the 27% consensus driven, as I was mentioning. And then what I mentioned earlier is that there's many gray areas in the middle. Many groups, for example, they do a majority rule to get down to 3 groups, and then they use consensus decision making to discuss those 3 and get to a final result. So I don't want you to view these as completely binary. It really is about trying to simplify this for the field, but also know that there's a lot of nuance within that. Then looking at across that typology, 7 different archetypes really emerged as existing in this field. And those are the patterns in the tapestry that I was mentioning. So those are women giving big, crowd granting networks, belonging through identity groups, organizing for social change groups, community project microgranting, live crowdfunding experiences, and host supporting groups. I'll go through each of those in brief. And I think we have some questions in the chat. We'll take those at the end. Feel free to keep those coming. So the first archetype here that many of you mentioned women in your earlier chats is women giving big. This photo here is of the incredible Women's Giving Circle of Howard County. In our report, we have a case study on each of these archetypes. We have a profile of a real collective giving group, so you can see some of these sliders in action. The Women's Giving Circle of Howard County launched in 2002, so they've really been around the block. They've given away $1.2 million into the field of Howard County, specifically focused on women and girls. And they're on the more formal end. They also have a $1.3 million endowment. They have formal programming that they're offering. They have lots of things that they're doing that are more on the formal end of things. So looking at this on the typology, the size of the women giving big groups tend to be big. hence the name, right? It's over 100 women coming together. Their learning is very structured. They often have committees or book clubs or specific ways of doing, DEI work or other things that offer that structured learning for the women in that circle. What's given is not just money. The women who are part of these groups understand that social change takes far more than just your financial resources. And so they're often volunteering with the groups, joining the board of the organizations that they're giving to, all of that. The giving level is on the higher end. Typically, they're giving, $1,000, $2,000. It's on the larger end compared to that metric of the $500. And there's many models. The Impact 100 model, for example, that's been around for a while, has 100 women plus giving $1,000 each, which ends up being a $100,000 grant that they're able to give out. On the governance side, they tend to lean more towards being more formal, more incorporated on the 501(c)(3) end. And like I mentioned, they definitely have paid staff. Sometimes they even have an executive director or a CEO that leads that collective giving group because so much effort is required. And 2002 for the Howard County Women's Circle, these groups have been around for a while. I would say this is like the first archetype that was always part of the collective giving movement, and it's exciting to see how it's continued. The second one I want to talk about are crowd granting networks. This one has exploded in popularity over the last decade or so. This photo here is of 100 women who care North suburban Chicago. This group there are nearly 800 chapters of the 100 Who Care Alliance network all around the world. This is one of those chapters. Each person commits $100 per meeting 4 times a year, and it's 100 women. So that's about $10,000 every single quarter that they're giving. They find a group, they pick the group, and every quarter, that's how the cycle operates, and they give it out. Since its inception in 2013, this collective giving group has donated over $706,000 to various groups in the Lake County area of North Suburban Cook County. So you can see here, this is another huge archetype that we've seen. The Grapevine Giving Network has also come online in the last 5 years or so, and they've also exploded with a similar model of members primarily giving $100 on a regular basis and having over 100 groups. Looking at them on the typology, this is really a great way to join philanthropy. If you've never considered yourself a philanthropist or given in any concerted, ongoing way, joining one of these groups is a fantastic way of doing that. You get to meet other people. You inspired by, giving $10,000 every single quarter out the door. They tend to focus more on networking, and it doesn't preclude them from having belonging as an outcome of what happens of being a part of it, but networking is really the impetus for that model. The size of the group, again, large, tends to be over 100. Decision-making, because you have so many people, tends to be that majority rule. Typically, that's done through a straw poll or raising of hands, some other online way of gathering what that decision is. The giving level, as I was mentioning, is about $100 a year, so less than 500. And the governance is really that the members themselves are giving the nominations for the organizations. They're very hyper-local, and it's very informal. People come and go out of these groups because you're talking about 100 people, right? You're always going to have attrition, just that's the human nature, and you're always going to be growing your group as well. I'm excited to see that model and all of these models grow. The third one I wanted to talk about is belonging through identity. This is the photo of the Stanislaus Latino Giving Circle. That's part of the Latino Giving Circle network. Shout out to Sada, who's on the chat today, whose Giving Circle is also part of the Latino Giving Circle network. This group has fewer than 25 members, and since its inception, they've given more than $100,000 to 11 organizations. And they've done a lot of work in pushing for real change that group cares about. So in 2022, they engaged their local board of supervisors and pushed for the American Rescue Plan Act funds to support farm workers and undocumented families with bonus pay and legal services. And that culminated in the allocation of $1 million to establish the county's first farm worker rescue center. So you can really see how these groups are pushing for broader change to happen in their community. Looking at this on the typology, these groups are, as the name implies, really about belonging. This is finding your sisterhood, finding your people, being in community with others that you would call a dear friend and compatriot. This is, I think I didn't put the numbers here, but tend to be less than 25 people. It really is around a living room, very, very tight knit and focused on a core identity. And the impact intention is really on social change. If you have a group who have a shared experience about, in this case, Latinos, right? They're going to be talking about issues that impact Latino populations here in Stanislaus County. And so social change is part of the impact intention that they have. They're also giving all 5 Ts and looking beyond money. And it's all about that solidarity giving, as I shared in that example. Decision making ends up being more consensus driven because you have that tight knit community. You have a deep understanding of their shared values amongst the group. And so you're able to go there. You're able to have those hard conversations, change your mind, change your thinking, and come out the other side with a decision. And these groups have really leaned into trust-based philanthropy principles as well. The fourth archetype is organizing for social change. These two, belonging for identity and organizing for social change, are related, but the reason why we pulled them out is that there's a particular subset of groups who sometimes have a shared belonging associated with them or a shared sense of identity, but really social change, social impact, social justice is the core of why they're doing their work. This photo here is of the incredible group CoThink, which has been around since 2014. Their model is incredible. They focus on collective healing, access to resources, capacity building, and systems change work, and really are looking at a catalytic transformational change initiatives led by BIPOC leaders, Black, Indigenous, people of color leaders. And CoThink has given around 250, in 2023, CoThink gave almost $250,000 to 52 orgs across Western North Carolina. And to date, they've given close to $1 million since 2014 through grants and self-care stipends, capacity building, and coaching support. And they have a shared leadership model where community members have a voice in determining funding priorities and selecting grant recipients. In terms of this archetype, it's really members are giving themselves, but there's a big emphasis also on mobilizing others to give too. And so that's really interesting that we all have access to so many more resources than we might be able to give. And that's another leverage point. On the learning end, again, this is very structured learning. They're deep in their community, learning about issues, figuring out how to make big waves happen in terms of social change. Impact intention obviously is on the social change end. They're definitely giving all 5 Ts. And the recipient type tends to be more untraditional, as with CoThink giving, individual grants and healing awards, right? These are groups that might give more to 501(c)(4) organizations because they understand the full swath of how social change works here in the US. They might be giving to artists who are doing narrative change work, but are individuals. So more untraditional and unique in that model. Staffing also tends to have paid staff. Social change work is also hard. This requires time and dedication and effort of many over time. And the giving approach really lands on the trust-based philanthropy side here. As I've gone through these 4, you can see I'm not doing every single piece across all 21 of these spectra on the 3 ends of the typology. And that's because we're trying to highlight the main things that make this archetype unique and different. And again, I just want to underscore you might be a belonging for identity archetype, but really be focused on social change. You could be multiple archetypes at the same time. It's really just about seeing some of the patterns in the tapestry. The fifth one that I want to pull up here are community project microgrants. This is an incredible model that's been around since the start of this movement as well. Awesome Foundation is really leading the charge on this effort. You can see this photo of Awesome Foundation, New York City. I think we have somebody on the call from an Awesome Foundation chapter. This model is not about the sort of typical nonprofit industrial complex and giving into that. This model is about small dollars and really finding unique and creative projects that operate outside of some of those traditional structures. And so for Awesome Foundation New York City, they have chapters, or sorry, Awesome Foundation has chapters all over the world, and Awesome Foundation New York supports local and issue-specific efforts. And they typically have they call them trustees, review between 100 and 200 proposals from others in their community and give about $1,000 to a unique and local project. And the question they all ask is, how will this actually make your community more awesome? I love that question. I think we should all ask that. Yes, sorry, every month. Thank you for that clarification. And since 2010, Awesome Foundation New York City has awarded microgrants to a myriad of projects spanning arts, technology, education, sustainability, and beyond. So really cool to see what they're doing. Members typically span multiple identities. These are folks that are, care about doing awesome in the world, not so much about a specific identity. They're really leaning into unstructured exploratory curiosity on what they're funding. Recipient type is definitely untraditional. It's individuals, local leaders who are just wanting to do something great in their community. The giving is on the smaller end. The geography is very hyper-local. Staffing is all volunteer-led, and it's also highly trust-based philanthropy. This is not about, giving a grant to a nonprofit and having a grant agreement. This is about giving $1,000 to a local artist to do something awesome in their community. So it's really interesting to see this model rise up, and it's a great way also of getting into this work. The sixth one is live crowdfunding experiences. This example here is the Funding Network. Their model is around holding events that basically raise funds in the moment. So this is not a long-term group that comes together, but they host these events. Folks come in, they have different presentations and ways of people learning about them. And then in the moment, those groups are decided. The Funding Network is all around the globe as well. And you can read more about them in the report. These groups tend to be more about networking because it's different people every time coming to the event. The size of the group also tends to be really large. Their impact intention tends to be more on the charity end because this is the first and one-off way that folks might be involved. Folks tend to give only money, tend to give to nonprofits, more informal, and this really is about a one-off or time-bound thing. There are also many pop-up giving circle examples where folks are coming together for a 90-minute pop-up experience to just get a taste of what collective giving is without sort of being a part of a long-term circle. This is an example. This whole archetype is great as an entryway to then join a full collective giving group once you understand and learn the model a little bit more. And then the last archetype that we wanted to lift up is host supporting groups. This is a smaller, I would say overall smaller number of groups who do this. And this example here is Mercy Corps' Women's Climate Alliance Circle. And so this is where a nonprofit itself has a group attached to it. Sometimes you might call this a fundraising society or a friends of group. It has so many principles of a collective giving group, but also sort of all the funding goes to the nonprofit itself, whereas in many collective giving groups, the money is decided by the members and goes out to different groups every single time they give. So this is a little bit different from that. This group, the Women's Climate Alliance, supports Mercy Corps, which is a global org working on the front lines of crisis to support communities towards a more inclusive, resilient future. And the Women's Climate Alliance has set a goal to raise $50 million for the Women in Climate Fund as part of Mercy Corps. So you're talking about much different potential dollars here if it's connected to a nonprofit or a host. There's so many different ways that this can come about. In terms of that archetype, looking here, this is really connected to an existing group. This is the unique part about this archetype. There's really structured learning that goes on because that's the connection point between the nonprofit or host org and the circle. The recipient identification, the reason why this is crossed out is because there are no, groups aren't suggesting where to give. The money is going to that nonprofit entity. Decision making also, there is no decision to be made. And so what the group talks about is instead, sometimes they give to a certain program within the nonprofit, or there are other ways where that learning is happening. The group, the host really owns all of the decisions. There's definitely paid staffing there, and it's more informal, but a part of that piece. So those are the 7 archetypes. I hope that inspired you to go and read the report. Again, I just want to underscore that all of these, any individual collective giving group, you might change your sliders a little bit compared to the archetype as a whole. We were just trying to paint the broad brushstroke for people who aren't so close in this movement to start seeing that there are some themes, there aren't some patterns. It's not so much about, if you think of a giving circle, that's the only kind of giving circle exist. We hope it also helps you, if you're looking to join a group, have a better understanding of the kind of collective group that you want to join, right? That if you really want a social change group, you might not want to join a crowd granting network. Or if you really want, you just moved to a new city and you really want to meet people, you might want to join a crowd granting network, that there's different reasons why somebody would get involved. Michael, I think I'm going to pass it back to you.
Well, if you're not convinced to read the report by now, I'm not sure what else we can say to you after that amazing presentation of the tapestry. Thank you, Isis. And even the funding of this research was a collective effort, and we want to give a shout out and a big thank you to Fidelity's Catalyst Fund, to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Lodestar, and of course Bill and Melinda Gates, who at various times, various ways have supported the staff time and other resources necessary to carry out this kind of ambitious research. And a very big thank you to the members of Philanthropy Together's Brain Trust. When we've had meetings with them to talk about the research, the questions that they've raised, the suggestions that they've made have really enriched and given great nuance to the research. And I know we wouldn't have done so well with this work had it not been for the Brain Trust. So a big thank you to all those members as well. And as Isis mentioned, at the end of the report, pages 26 to 29, there's an interactive way where you can map your own collective giving. So you can, if you print out the report, you can kind of look and see what pattern makes sense to you when you think about your own group as a way of understanding where you stand or finding a new way forward, whatever is of use for you in that moment. And we came out of this with a couple of recommendations. For new and emerging leaders, you can use this typology to shape your vision, to understand the trade-offs and the choices that you're making. There's no sort of right or wrong way. The question is, what path forward, what choices make the most sense for you and the other people that you're forming your collective giving group with. In terms of existing groups, it's a way for you to kind of check in and think about your model. Think about if you're doing something one way, might you do it another way? It can be eye-opening to go back and rethink and reevaluate the choices that you made previously. And then for field builders, for networks, for funders, to think about this typology in terms of what your strategies are, how the field can be strengthened, what the points of intervention might be, and how to scale up and support this amazing movement.
Thanks, Michael. And we went one step further to make it even more interactive, and we made a quiz that's on our website. You can, I think Ilyasa will probably put it in the chat right now, but you can answer a few quick questions and get a sense for which one of the archetypes might be more interesting to you. So we hope this is a great interactive and fun tool as more people learn about collective giving and are trying to wayfind through this space. Also want to remind everyone that the Global Giving Circle directory exists that has all of the groups that you heard about today there, so you can really understand who else is in this field and join a group that makes sense to you and search by location or issue or financial contribution. And now that you have all those typology pieces in your head, you'll better understand what you're looking at when you pull up any individual profile of a collective giving group. So as we close today, I would love to hear any insights or takeaways that you all have, and we'll stay on after the close to answer any questions that folks have about this research. And here are Michael and I's email if you want to get in touch with us as well. Thank you for joining us. We hope this was helpful. There's so much exciting work happening in the space of collective giving, and we hope this is one more wayfinding tool to get thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of more people into this work, because I truly believe in the bottom of my heart that this is one of the most exciting ways we're seeing right now of getting people engaged, firing up their opportunities for civic engagement, for using all of the 5 T's that everybody has to change the world in the way that we all hope it can change. Thank you for joining us. We'll stick around to answer any questions that you have.